Hi, this is Dr. Kimberley Linert, and you're listening to Incredible Life Creator Podcast. My guest today is Joe M. Turner. Joe M. Turner is a professional speaker, mentalist, and magician, a brand engagement and audience impact specialist. He creates customized corporate magic presentations and keynotes for promotional, motivational, and entertainment events in the United States and in the world. Welcome to the podcast, Joe.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yes, and I had the pleasure of seeing your show last Saturday night.
Thank
And
you for coming.
yes, it was so much fun. And of course, we were both saying, how did he do it?
Well, that's usually a good sign when that happens. Doing it, virtually and this is my office and this is where the show happens, doing a virtual show, but I'm glad that it has entertained people across the country.
Oh, yes, it was fun. And you made it interactive. We had our own cards, our own dice.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, it's an unusual time, but it's also a challenge. A creative challenge to try to come up with something that can be performed and engaging across this medium compared to a regular theater where you can hear them breathing and bring them up to help you and so forth. So with every, the world's in kind of an unusual spot at the moment. We're figuring out new tools, and so the artists are doing the same.
Yeah, and you've done it well. So
thank you.
And I'm still trying to figure out how you brought us up right close. You put the camera right there, and I was watching, but I still don't know how you did it.
Well, you're very kind. Thank you.
So, but let's just let people know a little bit more about you. So I know you didn't start out as a magician, as your main, way of making a living. So where did you grow up? Where did you start out? How did you get to where you are today?
Oh, goodness. I was born at a very early age in Jackson, Mississippi. So I'm a Southern boy all the way through. I'm a Mississippi boy. I grew up in a little town called Brandon, Mississippi, which is to the east of Jackson. It is the home of Marianne Mobley, who was Miss America, and I would see her picture on the wall of Brandon High School every day when I was going. So it was just quintessential small town, Southern USA. I went to Mississippi State University, studied physics, thought I was going to become a physics teacher and did my student teaching in physics. And I still love physics to this day, particularly astronomy and astrophysics. I keep in touch with my astrophysics professor. I keep in touch with, great people who influenced me. That's a theme we should probably revisit, keeping in touch with great people who influence you. But I decided one day to audition for a show. I went to see HMS Pinafore on stage at Mississippi State MSU Opera Theater. And I sat in the audience and thought, this looks like the most fun ever. I will try out next year and maybe I can be a tree or something in the background. And so the next year came along and I auditioned, and you had to, put together some music and sing and act and all that. And I went in and I ended up with a role. I ended up with the opening solo in Pirates of Penzance the next year. So that I was very intrigued with performing and acting and singing and all of that from that point on. As a child, I had done some magic, but it did not stick. I had gotten really interested when I was 5 and 6, and then really interested when I was 10 to 13 or 14. And then I kind of left it alone in high school, did the odd card trick in college. To speed this story up, I graduated with a degree to be a physics teacher, but went back and did most of another degree in communication with an emphasis in theater. Did 2 seasons of professional summer stock, and then panicked about being able to eat And so I took a job as a grunt in a management consulting company in Atlanta because, hey, Atlanta has theater and performing arts, so I'll be able to do it on the side. And I did that, married the most wonderful young woman. Uh, she moved to Atlanta and she finished her graduate degree, and I was going to start mine. And we had a child instead. And so different life directions, but it's all good. I finally was working for Bank of America, doing some similar change management consulting work in that organization. And it wasn't a good fit. I was feeling pretty depressed most of the time sitting in that. I mean, I had a nice office and a window and a view and it's Midtown. But I had to walk past the Fox Theater every day to get to Bank of America Tower. And it was terrible. And the bank said, we need you to move to Charlotte to continue. If you want to continue, we'll find a spot for you in Charlotte, but we don't have a spot for you in Atlanta anymore. We're taking that team out of Atlanta. And so we loved our house and our neighborhood and our church and our everything about our lives except for my job. Mm-hmm. And it didn't seem smart to chase that. But I went looking for another job, and this was fall of 2000. And nobody was hiring. I was going to have to take a pay cut anyway. And I said, well, if I'm going to take a pay cut anyway, I'm going to do what I've been doing on the side. Magic had come back into my life, and I was kind of doing it for fun on the side. And I said, let's just do this for a while and see what happens. And that's 20 years ago. I did church shows and birthday parties and little private things. And I got asked to do some corporate events. And that's where I really, before I went full time, I did some corporate events, and I didn't realize that you could do magic in that venue. I had never seen or heard of it. For me, magic was you're either a birthday party magician in your hometown or you're in Las Vegas. And I didn't know there was this whole in between world. And that's where I ended up finding what I do, mostly corporate. I work mostly for adults. I still do occasional shows for students, church ministry groups and children's groups, and once in a while. But I'm mostly a corporate guy. The occasional cruise or college or something. So that's kind of the nutshell version of what I've been doing. I've been fortunate to have interesting projects along the way in the last 20 years. I've learned some lessons, some good, some bad, as we all do. And I've, regrets, I've had a few, but so yeah, there's some things I should have done better, but all in all, I'm happy with the general trajectory of things, and trying to, during this last, what is this now, week 9, trying to be creative and productive and innovative and find new ways to do what I do in ways that people can interact with me and consume my content. I don't mean that sounds so commercial, but that they can engage with my content in new ways. And I was honored that you were intrigued enough to ask me to do this.
Yeah. And actually, when you started talking about, I think it was maybe 2003, 2004, I met you at one of those church ministry groups where you came and you performed magic up close and personal. I'm thinking, he's standing right next to us and he's doing this, and we still can't tell what he's doing. So,
well, hopefully you were entertained, and I'm honored that you remembered me from 17 years ago.
Yeah, well, yeah, you definitely made an impression. So, yeah, I really enjoyed it. So, talk about some of the things you kind of learned along the way, because you went from corporate, where someone was actually giving you a paycheck, to all of a sudden treading water. Okay, which direction do I go? So what are some of the things you learned along the way becoming a solar entrepreneur?
Um, it would not have been possible without a supportive family who has been there when times were really tough and have been able to help me keep going. I've been able to take odd side hustles from time to time, but generally speaking, if my wife and my parents and her parents weren't invested in this idea
Mm-hmm.
and didn't believe in what it can do for people, then it probably it wouldn't look like this today. So that's first and foremost. Second of all, I the first 2 years of my solopreneur work, I never understood anything about marketing or networking or advertising. In those days, people, you got a business card and what I had always worked in an environment where I was brought the work.
Yes.
Right? They brought the work to me. Somebody else sold the project. I was just told where to go, never had to sell it. And so I was like, well, I'll get a business card and I'll put up a website and I'll tell the people I know, and then we'll see. People will just swarm to my door and want my shows. And God took pity on me for a couple of years
Mm-hmm.
as I was able to put together odd things here and there. But a couple of things happened. Number one, I learned about small business networking, which totally changed my business. So that was an important lesson. Up until then, when I was asked to go to networking events, it really meant we're having drinks after work. And I'm like, well, I already saw you for 10 hours. If I was in the consulting firm, I wanted to go see a play or go to rehearsal or something. I didn't really want to hang out with you for another 2 hours. And so I didn't really do a lot of networking in the way that I probably should have in my corporate youthful in ignorance of what was to come. But I did start going to some networking events and learned a lot about how to build a small business by engaging and trying to help other people, and then they feel like they want to help you. So I've tried to do that. So that's the networking and the supportive family. The gosh, I'm sure others will occur to me, but those are probably the two biggest. I couldn't even try it without a supportive family. Networking was transformational. I would say that building credibility in what you do, one step at a time. I was fortunate to come into the corporate side of entertainment with a corporate background.
Mm-hmm.
So I spoke the language. I knew my way around the organizational hierarchies that you would encounter.
Mm-hmm.
And I just, people were comfortable having me in those environments. And it gave me credibility because I had been there. I know other people who try to fake. I know people who've come into magic and, they made their own youthful mistakes, and they tried to either contrive something in their resume or phony this or that. And I was able to not have to do that because of the way I came into the industry. And early on, I did get a very credible contract with Coca-Cola and a group called Riff, Reading is Fundamental. Back when you and I were kids, they had
I
commercials on
that
Saturday
one.
morning, right? When
Yep.
the little Riff book truck would come through, and it was like a portable library going into neighborhoods and stuff. You don't see those commercials now. They still have programs, but it's not the same as when I was a kid. I used to, why doesn't that come to our neighborhood?
No.
But they partnered together when the first Harry Potter movie was released. We're looking for a magician to create a show that used magic to enhance people's interest in reading, to encourage kids to read, to encourage families to read. And I got a call to submit a proposal for this. And this proposal was magic, theater, writing, directing, corporate consulting. It was everything I had ever done fit into this puzzle of what they needed someone to do and do well. And so I got the gig. I can't believe how badly I undercharged them. That was, in retrospect, I should have made a lot more than I did for the work that I did for them. But they got a bargain, and I got a very good credit on my resume, which has helped me the rest of my career.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, oh, that sounds wonderful.
There's some lessons I learned.
Wow. And how did you go from, I know you're a magician, you're a mentalist, but you're also a speaker. So how did you transition into that?
Well, if in corporate performing, it is often the case that a client will ask you to customize something that you're doing to be about their message, particularly when companies hire me to work at their trade show exhibits or product launches or marketing events, which I hope those come back, probably be next year. But when I'm asked to represent a company at their trade show booth, for example, I will have put some of their logos and branding on some of my material. I'll script the material to be about the message that they want their people to take away from that particular exhibition. So I had gotten pretty well acquainted with the idea of embedding messaging in the magic. Next step was I would be asked to do a program at a conference, and they would say, "Oh, this is gonna be our theme," or "Would you mind doing a kickoff when we come in at 9:00? Would you just do something that's 3 or 4 minutes but sets the table for this theme?" Mm-hmm. So, just as a performer in this space, you have the opportunity to start integrating messaging and themes into what you do. And after a while, some of my clients would find out about my consulting background and ask me to do even more. I see you have a change management consulting background. Could you talk about something with resiliency or change agency and being leading change and things like that? And so as all of those things started to sort of be stirred up into the stew, it finally occurred to me that, well, if I can do it with their messages, why can't I do it with my messages? Mm-hmm. So I developed some ideas of things I thought would be helpful to different kinds of audiences, and how I could use magic to tell that story and deliver that content. And that's how the speaking side of it started to grow.
Oh, interesting. And when you talk about embedding a message, so sometimes you're talking about actually an advertising message, but
right.
Are you using it for other things too, as far as I hate the word motivation, but to
inspirational, motivational. Some people sort of resist the motivational speaker level. It carries a certain set of prejudgments, that term, but there are good reasons to embrace it too. And people need to be encouraged and inspired and motivated. I know I do. I've had a pretty rough couple of days, frankly. And so I'm looking for my own, crank the engine again and get it going again. So sometimes when I'm embedding messages, it is strictly marketing, sales and marketing. And this is what you should know about this product. And here's 3 takeaways that I want you to be able to talk. And so I'll use magic to drive those points home and tie those messages to a magic effect. And so companies pay for that. That is another form of marketing and advertising. But the other kinds of messages might be in a church setting. There might be a spiritual message. In my keynotes that I do for a living, I talk about lessons from the theater and from magic and how we create amazing moments for our audiences. And I draw parallels between some of our principles and business competencies that organizations can leverage so that their audiences are also amazed and engaged in their amazing experience. So it's a customer experience talk. I do sometimes tweak it a little more into a leadership or change management arena. But the bottom line is we're all on stage. You're on stage. We're on stage right now.
Yeah.
But when you do anything professionally, you are metaphorically on stage, but there are lessons from the real physical stage that you can take and apply to the way you take your service to market. And so that's how I use my keynote, and I perform to illustrate those principles. And then we unpack what I've done and say, well, why is this amazing? What's the secret sauce in this experience that we can learn from? And I've done that in all kinds of industries to help people and organizations do better work for their audiences.
Nice. And just to switch gears here a little, so I know you are also offering, besides the magic show, you are doing music. Talk about the
Yeah,
music.
I haven't really marketed my music background in the same way. Magic has been my primary, magic and speaking, magic as entertainment, magic as speaking, those kinds of things. But as I said before, I do have a fairly deep musical theater background. So during the stay-at-home time, the grand pause, I don't know what we're going to call this. It needs a good name. I don't like quarantine for it. Quarantine is much more serious than this. So this is a great pause in our society. And so on Tuesdays and Fridays, I go to my piano, which is in that room over there, and I set up a camera and I sit down at the piano and play and sing show tunes for an hour. And sometimes I do themed days. Like Friday, we're going to do Grease. Friday, we're going to have like a Grease sing-along. Everybody who wants to come sing Grease. And I'm not, people might tip me, but I'm not charging admission for this. I'm just playing out of the vocal selections. And we're just going to have fun. I have the score to hundreds. I have the piano vocal score for many musicals that I've accumulated over the years. So I do that. And then on Sunday mornings, I sit in there and play hymns for 30, 45 minutes. And so atlantapianist.com is sort of my secret music side thing.
Oh, okay. Secret. So remember that. It's a secret.
Well, I made the website because the domain was available, and I felt like, well, that's too good a domain to not take. Atlantapianist.com. How is that not available? But I got it. And so I put up a couple of pages there, but that's not my primary artistic pursuit, but I love it when I get asked to do it. So I was the church pianist at First Baptist Tucker for 7 years. So I've played all of the weddings and all of the funerals and all of the services and all of the special events. And so I understand. But now I play mostly show tunes and standards and, Great American Songbook stuff. Cole Porter, Irving Berlin, George Gershwin. I love it.
Oh, yeah. Sounds so much fun. Sounds like so much fun. I love those show tunes. So now I know you've also done some traveling. Do you want to talk about that?
Sure. I have. Magic has been everything. Everything is a blessing and a curse, right? Everything has the good things and everything has the bad things. And there are some really tough things about this business. But one of the really nice things that has happened is I've met people along the way who have taken an interest in what I do and thought it would be a fit for something else. And so they'll bring me along on an adventure. One of the producers who I had worked for in a couple of different small theaters up in, one was in Atlantic City and one was in Delaware. One day the phone rings and he says, Joe, would you be interested in performing on a cruise ship? I've got this project and where I send out close-up magicians or parlor magicians. So you work at a small table for 25 people and you do a 20-minute show. And you might do it twice a day in the afternoon when you're at sea. So it's not every day, it's not, but, and then the rest of the time you would be a passenger. You have a passenger stateroom and so forth. And it's a luxury cruise line. You wouldn't get paid for it, but you could bring a guest for free. And we're talking about a very upscale cruise line. And I said, sure, I'm interested. And he says, well, I've had someone on the team was supposed to do a cruise in June and can't go. Can you cover it? And this is March, maybe March or April. It's getting close. And I checked the dates, and my wife wasn't able to go with me on that one, but my daughter was available, and she was 15 at the time. So I did it, and I ended up on the team, and that was 2013. So it's been 7, this is year 8. And I've gotten to go on 1 or 2 cruises a year ever since, and taken all of my family with me at different times. I've been to I don't even know. I mean, I had traveled pretty extensively in my own youth through Europe, and had been to probably, by the time I graduated college, I'd probably been to 12 or 15 countries in the world, mostly Europe. And then this came along and I got to go to Europe again, but Asia and Australia and Africa. And so now I've been to probably 50 countries in the world because of magic and networking as a result. And I've eaten good food and had fancy wine and seen beautiful sights and entertained people. So that's been a really wonderful thing that magic has allowed my family and me to do. So I'm very grateful for that program. I hope that all of the cruise lines survive this economic interruption. I think Norwegian isn't the line that I perform on. I think they're struggling. I hope they make it. It's questionable. There's some others that every industry is going to look different. 6 months, a year from now, who knows what the world will look like. But I believe that the line that I have been sailing on is going to survive. And we'll see how if the program continues. If it does, I'll be thrilled. If it doesn't, I'll be disappointed. But it's been a beautiful thing.
Yeah, it sounds wonderful. And I don't think you could have gotten that in that first corporate job you were in, where they wanted you to move to Charlotte.
Well, I love Charlotte. Don't get me wrong. It's a wonderful, wonderful city. And my brother lives in North Carolina, other side of the state. But in corporate, you might get to go to some kind of retreat or incentive trip or something like that. Or if you make it to the top of your organization, maybe you get to just take off for a couple of weeks and go to Tahiti or whatever you want to do. But if you're wealthy or you retire with wealth, but that wasn't my path. But fortunately, some of the travel still fell into this path. I will also say that just to encourage people, if you're not involved in your industry's associations and societies, there are really good reasons to do it. I know it's not as popular now for people to do that as it was in the 60s and 70s. And, in the 50s, oh yes, I'm an elk, or or I'm in the American Society of Magic Marker Cap Distributors, or whatever it might be. There was some membership benefit that you felt like, well, just by having that membership, I am somebody in my world. And that's no longer the case. You can get a lot of information and stuff for free. You can network with a lot of different people for free. And the same is in the magic industry. We have a couple of different magic societies, organizations that are professional associations and hobbyist associations. And mostly hobbyists are members, and I would say more professionals seem to be active. But it's just, and you get a but people are like, well, what's the benefit? I can go on the internet and find out, where to get anything or how to. I would just say that, like most things, you get out of an organization what you put into it. I committed to one of our organizations and started working on committees and working hard. And I ended up going through and became a member of the executive committee. And then I went up to vice president, president-elect, and then international president. And as a result of that, I got to go to some really interesting conferences in England and in South America and in Asia. I went to Bangkok. I haven't been to Bangkok on a cruise. I haven't been to Bangkok for personal. I went to Bangkok because I was brought over to perform and to serve sort of as a dignitary because I was president of this association at the International Brotherhood of Magicians. So I would just say, don't knock the opportunities that there are. Yeah, it stinks. It can really be a pain to work hard for free or to volunteer. But if you really feel like your organization needs a different vision and you're the person with it, well, get in there and do it. I just, that has always baffled me, to sit back and complain, but never once put your hand in and say, well, let me see what I can do to help this. I have a different point of view about this. Maybe we should try this. And it can be hard. You can be pushed down and not listened to and all that, but team up with somebody. There's always, you saw the show Saturday night when I do the thing with the numbers and the grid.
Yeah.
And, if you have your goal, just because you can't get to it this way doesn't mean you don't have all these other paths to get to what you need to do. And I try to remind myself of that. I try to remind myself of that in my own business when I'm discouraged and, well, why is this happening? And why am I not able to do that? And then you can be your own worst critic and rob yourself of a lot of peace because you focus on the stuff that you're not doing or the stuff that other people are doing. And okay, Joe, what are you going to do? And who do you know? And what can you find? And have you got a good idea? Or what's missing? If you can identify the thing, knowing exactly what you're missing is almost as good as having it, in my view. If you can identify a specific thing that you need that you don't have, that's really good. You're only one step away, right? It's very difficult to solve a nebulous problem.
Yes, it is.
It's a cloudy, foggy problem is much harder to solve because you don't know what's wrong. But it's brilliantly wonderful to be able to identify a specific problem that needs to be solved, and then you have the whole thing that you need. So it's great to have the solution, but it's great to know that a solution exists. Yeah. If you can identify the specific thing that you need, that's really close to success, is knowing exactly what the problem is. So
yeah, that makes sense to me. I'm an optometrist, so that makes sense to me. People come in and this is happening. Oh, well, this is the problem. Okay, now we can attack it. We can
well, in mathematics, I mean, it's kind of the joke that the mathematician doesn't have to actually produce the solution. They just have to prove that a solution exists. And once you prove that it exists, it's almost as good as solving the problem. And I just think that applies to everyone, that once you can identify the specific thing that needs to change, a new thing that has to come in or something that has to go out. If you can identify the specific issue, that's really valuable. In consulting, they paid the company that I worked for, people paid them lots of money to identify the problem. That's when you take your car to the mechanic, the diagnostic has a fee because there's value in knowing what's wrong. And so I think that I try to remind myself that knowing that there's a problem isn't terrible as long as you know what the problem is. So that can be it can be encouraging. That sounds kind of counterintuitive, contraindication, right? Counterintuitive that, oh yeah, I've got this problem. That can be encouraging if you really do know what the problem is. So I'll stop preaching on that.
So as I'm hearing you talk about all these different, art, science, entertaining, I'm just curious, what kind of books do you read, or what's your favorite book? What do you feed your mind with?
I have read, and right now I'm reading a magic book that was written by a friend of mine. So I can't go into a lot of detail on that. I have a fairly extensive library, mostly magic, a lot of business, a good bit of, books that changed my life. Number one, there's a book called The Memory Book by Harry Lorraine and Jerry Lucas. They wrote a book on mnemonic memory. That's one of the things I teach and speak on. It changed the way I absorb information and think about remembering things. And it certainly helped me through high school and college. If people are interested about that, I'm doing my next seminar on that on Tuesday the 19th in the afternoon in Eastern time. So I think that is a vastly valuable skill, and I just happened upon that book randomly in my life, and it changed me. Another book that I love, Space by James Michener. It's a novel about the space program from World War II through the Apollo years. And that book made me want to study physics even more than I already had a telescope, and I already loved the stars and the planets and all of the science behind astronomy. But that book, I was so fascinated. So those are some good books. What else do I read? I read presidential biographies. And some I've read, just looking at my shelf behind the computer, I see 1776, the David McCullough book, but also the John Adams biography, I think, is spectacular. I've got Grant, I've got Eisenhower, Lincoln, let's see, McKinley. I also have some Washington, of course. I have some later ones, but lots of Grant. I think Grant's a fascinating figure to study. And the presidential library, most people don't know this, the official presidential library for Ulysses S. Grant, and people don't know where it is. Mississippi State University is the home of the Ulysses S. Grant Presidential Library. It's worth a visit. So I'll tell you that. And I also have Margaret Thatcher's memoirs over there. So lots of leaders, old and more modern, that I try to read and learn something about them. I've got your traditional business books, your Purple Cow and your Who Moved My Cheese and those kinds of things. But I read other stories as well. I read books that my friends have written. I write for a magazine in my industry that I've been writing for 20 years. So I try to keep up with that, and the Journal of the International Brotherhood of Magicians that I read and write for. But specific books, Space, The Memory Book, love her or hate her, I recommend everyone read at least one book by Ayn Rand, The Fountainhead or Atlas Shrugged. I reread Atlas Shrugged every 4 or 5 years, not because I embrace everything about the philosophy of Ayn Rand and objectivism. Uh, I'm a Christian. That's my background. I'm kind of a pretty conservative Christian guy. I can't go all the way into Ayn Rand's objectivism, but I think it is misrepresented a lot of times when people talk about her. And there are some interesting things to learn from that book, Atlas Shrugged. It bogs down, but it's interesting. I don't dismiss it as readily as some people do. And then finally, I would say anything written by C.S. Lewis is worth reading and rereading. I've read everything that he wrote, probably some things several times. I think everything at least twice. So I highly recommend. And so that's a weird thing for a guy to say, well, read C.S. Lewis and Ayn Rand, because there's real obstacles between their points of view. But I learned something from both of them that I think has helped me think about the world and try to the way I want to treat people and the way I want to be treated, of course. And the Bible is a given. I just find it's a hard recommendation because it's so charged. People just, it's kind of a trite answer. Oh yes, the Bible. Of course the Bible. But some people are resistant to that. So I would say, well, read some C.S. Lewis instead. Just start there and see where that takes you, because you can absorb philosophy even if you don't want to be embroiled in whatever your religious diktats might be. You find that if you object to that, okay, just read C.S. Lewis and absorb it from the logical and philosophical approach that he has to writing about things. And I think that's a good recommendation. I didn't expect to talk about books this long. I'm sorry. I have a lot that I like to recommend.
Sounds like you do, and that makes total sense. I know when I was growing up, I came from a Christian background, but there's also within the Christian, there's lots of different kinds of beliefs.
Oh yeah.
And when I was going into middle school, the only private school that would work for us was a Christian school, but a different belief than what we had. And what my mother said to me is, she said, they're going to teach you something different. I was going to go through the catechism. I was going to go through all the things
right
there.
Right.
She said, but that's okay. She said, listen and learn, and then know what your own beliefs are. And all through life, whenever you hear something different, just listen, understand it, and say, okay, these are the pieces that work for me. And you take them and you make them your own. And the pieces that don't work, you just get rid of them. And I have done that my whole life. So I'll read political things on both sides.
Right.
I like to read things from both points of view, because I think there's something valuable on both sides. And then you can understand what the other person is thinking, or at least understand why they think it.
Well, particularly from, as you were talking about your Christian school, Catholic school experience, I'm a Southern Baptist, but I think Augustine was onto it when he said, he's talking about in essentials, unity, in non-essentials, liberty, and in all things, charity. That was sort of his three-way for people within the umbrella of Orthodox belief to treat each other. It's like, yes, we're going to differ on some of these non-essential points, but we are going to be unified on these core pieces, and in these other non-essentials will allow the liberty to differ, but all is based on this foundation that we're going to trust each other and be charitable toward each other and love each other. So I think that's really great. And I quote Augustine a lot. I need to do better in that sometimes. And the thing about being willing to read something that you disagree with, I'm all about, is it Voltaire that said the mark of an educated mind is the ability to entertain a thought without agreeing with it?
Yes.
I think it's Voltaire. I'm not positive. But the idea is that you can at least consider the argument.
Mm-hmm.
And even in my own path, I do have my core beliefs. I know what I believe. Sometimes I'm convinced to adjust my belief or tweak this or turn this dial up a notch or down a notch or whatever. So yeah, I try to pay attention to what other people think. Yes, as I've gotten older, some things have made me more convinced that this is exactly the right thing. And then other times I'm like, oh, really? Okay, well, I have to revisit that. So I'm generally okay with that. I find that temporal things, temporal issues, business and society and politics and those sorts of, and by politics, I mean current issues, like whatever the hot issues are, temporal things, I'm more likely to flex a little on. I do have core principles and core foundational beliefs that it would be much more difficult to convince me to change, because I just feel like they've been proven in my life over and over and over again. And when I do them and do them well with a good attitude, good things happen. And when I don't do them or I contradict them or I think, well, let me try this other way because it seems better than that, and things don't happen the way that they should. And I've just, most of the troubles that I've had in my life, I could look at decisions I've made and I say, would my mama and papa have approved of that decision? And they probably wouldn't have. They were probably right on 99% of the stuff that is wrong with my life would not be wrong if I had said, what would my grandparents have really thought about that? They would probably be on target. And as I get older, I'm more appreciative of the time that I had with them, the spending time with people who influenced me over the years, trying to make sure that they know I admire them. They're not all older than I am. I reached out to someone last night who I admire very much. I think she's a brilliant artist, a performer, and I had the opportunity to talk about her in my show. I think you were in that show. I lifted you up.
Yeah, I heard.
So I sent her a screenshot from the show and said, I just want you to know I was talking about you Saturday night, because a young woman had expressed interest in magic and where are the women? And I wanted you to know that I lifted you up as an example. And so I would say take that applies to business too, is staying in touch with and showering your appreciation on people who have blessed you in some way. They have lifted you up. They've encouraged you when you were down. They've supported you. They've promoted you. There are people who have helped me get through some really rough patches in my life and business. And so I think it's really important to the success of your business to be the kind of person who reflects that back to them, and tries to, not just back to them, but also to do for other people what they did for you, mentoring people and encouraging people. So anyway, I'm not really this deep of a thinker. You're asking me questions that sort of uncorked the bottle.
Wow. Yeah. And I agree. We want to show appreciation because sometimes that's all people want. Money's one. It's always nice to get paid, but appreciation, there's nothing like appreciation.
People want, there was when I went to Mississippi State, and because of the particular scholarship I had, I got to meet with the president every month, president of the university. We would meet with him in his office and talk about leadership principles. And this scholarship program grew and continued. But one of the things that he said in a number of settings, it's been said by others, but I heard it from him, was everyone you meet is wearing a sign that says, please make me feel important.
Mm-hmm.
People are crying out to be appreciated and encouraged and validated. Please make me feel valuable.
Mm-hmm.
Please see me and hear me so that I'm not going through life feeling like nobody ever cared at all that what I do is important. Please make me feel important. And I can relate to that because I got a performer ego.
Mm-hmm.
Performer egos, we go second to second craving the next applause. I totally understand that. But it's true, everybody doesn't want applause, but everybody wants to be validated and heard, and that what they do is recognized, and rewarded is even better, but at least recognized. And so, yeah, I'm trying to learn from the smart people
Mm-hmm.
who've been in my life.
Mm-hmm. Now, I would consider you a celebrity, but I'm just curious, if you could meet a celebrity, who would you want to meet?
If I could what?
If you could meet any celebrity or go have lunch with them, who would it be?
Okay, I have my general answer for this question is Carol Burnett. If I knew someone, and I'll put this out, if anybody watching or listening to this knows somebody who knows Carol Burnett, get in touch with me. I will meet her anywhere in the world and treat her to lunch to spend 45 minutes with her.
All
I
right.
think she is. I know you don't hear that answer every day,
Mm-hmm.
but she's a musical theater person, obviously a comedian, but
Mm-hmm.
comes from the Broadway musical theater background, and Once Upon a Mattress, and of course Oliver Television. But she just seems like the most genuine kind of celebrity to me, that I would think I could learn from and just talk to her about performing. And that's kind of the connection that she had with her audience. That's kind of the connection I want to have with my audience when I'm performing with them, is that we're both in on the joke. The magic is fun, but it's really about you and me interacting and having this experience together. And maybe we learn something about it. Maybe we laugh at something together, but maybe it's a fooler. Maybe it's, it's the baseball thing or whatever. We have this amazing experience together, but at the end, it's not just, I'm so glad that trick was awesome. It's, I'm so glad I saw Joe.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so glad we had this time together. That is the Carol Burnett philosophy that I want to be in the way I interact. There are other people that I've been influenced by. I would love to have met Johnny Carson. I love Dick Van Dyke, and I know he's active in the Magic Castle from time to time, but I've just never been around when he's around, and so I just haven't had that opportunity. But if I could pick someone now, probably Carol Burnett.
Yeah, that is a very interesting answer. And I know growing up, we all loved her. We just loved her.
Yeah, my wife and I, we still watch the clips, and we watch on YouTube the clips of when the Siamese elephants and Tim Conway talking about that, and they just fall over on the floor laughing. It's so funny.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to revisit those because
I'll send you a link. It's so good.
that sounds great. So I know we've been talking throughout the podcast about the different things you do, but could we kind of like organize it for people? What's your website? What shows do you have happening during the week, or piano or music, or kind of go down the list so we can know how to.
All right. My primary website is turnermagic.com. turnermagic.com. That is where you find out about what I'm doing as a speaker and as an entertainer, the offerings that I have for your meetings, conferences, events, as a mystery performer. Right. So I'm gonna break some natural laws for your entertainment pleasure. And that's where you find out about the magic stuff that I do and the speaking. Now, that being said, to find out about the virtual things that I have coming up, you can go to that website, and in the menu, there's a thing that says virtual programs. And if you click on that, there's an entry that says box office. And you can go buy a ticket, and you can just see a list of what I've got coming up. What I've got coming up is my show Saturday night, Virtual Charms. This is the show that you saw. It lasts about 55 minutes to an hour, about right at an hour. All kinds of magic, interactive, predictions come true, and decisions made by people in the audience affect what happens here. And it's intriguing and definitely a different kind of magic show than you've ever seen before. It is designed for adults. It's not a children's show. There's no bunny rabbits, there's no balloon hats, it's designed for adults, but it's suitable for families. There were families watching and they enjoy it. But I would say, a 6-year-old by herself isn't gonna stay with the show, but a family together will enjoy it and respond and interact well with it. I'm a performer for adults generally. And I will also say I'm keeping an eye on the New York Times Friday. That's all I'll say about that.
All right.
But check the art section. Then my memory training seminar is next Tuesday, the 19th. And that is where that's the professional version. I do a student version and a professional version. And I introduce and teach with examples and with interaction, the people are participating, how to use mnemonic memory techniques to remember lists, or how to give up, all the content of a presentation. What happens if your PowerPoint dies, or you drop your note cards, or how to give a presentation without notes, or to remember any kind of outlined information. This is good for students studying for tests, or exams, or people giving presentations, or people who are trying to remember where they parked at the airport, or people who can't remember where they put their phone down, or people who all kinds of memory issues. And the student version is slightly shorter. And I'll probably schedule another one of those coming up later. But right now I'm doing the professional version, which includes all of that plus names, faces, and numbers. So remembering numbers, how helpful is it to remember all of your credit card numbers and PIN numbers and passwords and confirmation codes and things? If you just knew all of that and you didn't have to go find your purse or your wallet every time you wanted to do something, that's very helpful to know. And names and faces, to be able to remember dozens of people at a party. Even if you don't remember everybody, if you remembered 20% of the people you met at a party, you're still going to look like a rock star. And I'm going to teach you those kinds of things. So those are the things that I have coming up. My other website is atlantapianist.com, and that's the music stuff. And I'll tell you, that's not my primary way of making a living. So when I go online Tuesdays and Fridays and Sunday mornings. Usually Tuesdays and Fridays at 2 in the afternoon Eastern, and then Sunday morning at 8:30. This Friday's Grease sing-along is going to be at 12:30 Eastern because I have to be done before 2. My son is taking an AP exam, and we need the internet clear and Zoom all set for him to do his. So this Friday at 12:30, Grease sing-along, turn it on. We're going to have fun. And that's fun. And then if I could ask one thing, if people don't want to do any of that, I would love for them to like my Facebook page, which is facebook.com/Turner Magic. It's Joe M. Turner, speaker, entertainer. If you just go like that page, that's where I put up, well, what's coming up next? What's coming up next? And so if you just follow one thing, follow that.
All right. Well, thank you. And that did help organize everything into one area. So thank you so much. And
thank you.
Yeah. And thanks for being on the podcast and all your knowledge and fun stories. And, I hope everybody tunes into the magic show this coming Saturday.
Get a ticket. It's on Eventbrite. It's called Virtual Charms, May 16th at 7 p.m.
And before we finish today, any last words of advice on how to live an amazing, incredible, extraordinary life?
How to live an incredible, extraordinary life. Boy, that is, if I could bottle it, I would say that the thing that has allowed me to be the most extraordinary is probably Polonius speaking to Laertes in Hamlet. He said, "This above all, to thine own self be true." And if you do this, it is inevitable that you cannot be false to anyone. That's not the exact point. But the point is, this above all, to thine own self be true, and it must follow as the night the day, thou canst not then be false to any man. If you can identify what is true about yourself, which is hard, to be honest about who you are. I wanted to be a suave leading man. I'm not a suave leading man. I wanted to sing tenor. I don't sing tenor. I wanted a lot of things about me to be different, but that's not who I am. The sooner you embrace the true you, who you really are created to be, the more quickly you will be able to enjoy and be enriched by living truthfully in the world. So that's probably the best advice I can close on.
All right. And that's beautiful advice. So thank you so much, Joe Turner, Joe M. Turner. Don't forget that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being on the podcast. And we'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you.